And
Okay.
we're live.
Okay,
Thank
good
you.
afternoon, everybody. It is Tuesday, February 4th. It's 1:32 p.m. and we are here for the Budget Advisory Committee meeting number 1. And it's just a kind of a recap of what we talked about last week. Okay, you can see the agenda there. We're going to go through a number of things today. This is our budget development timeline. As you can see, last Monday night was the first committee meeting, and today is the makeup meeting, February 4th. The rest of the schedule is posted below and can also be found on our website. And if you're not sure where to find the information on our website, if you go to our northmerrickschools.org page and you click on Board of Education and Budget Information, you'll be able to see the 25-26 budget, and if you wanted to, you could also see the 24-25 budget information. We're going to be posting everything there relating to the budget, so it'll all be available there after each meeting. So our budget development process starts around November. We send all of our budget forms to all our budget builders, which include our administrators, our principals, our department heads. They all review their budgets and expenditures from prior years and start to build their budget for the upcoming year. Between December and January, we get those budgets back. We start compiling the information into the larger budget for the district. We meet with administrators to review the budgets and clarify any questions that people have. Between January and April, which is where we are now, we start our committee process where the board and the Budget Advisory Committee review the budget. And on April 8th, the board will adopt the budget. And also important to note, on March 1st, we are required to file the tax cap calculation with the Controller's Office. That's online on their website. And I will include going forward, there's some other forms and things that happen later in the process, but just for now, I figured these are our important dates to focus on.
And we're already in February.
I know, hard to believe.
Crazy.
So anytime we're thinking about creating a budget, these are the goals we have in mind. We want to keep a balanced budget that supports our programs, that maintains and enhances our student programs and services, our facilities, and we want to stay within the tax cap. And you'll notice on the bottom, I have the balance there. Anything we plan to spend, which is our expenditures, we also have to have enough revenue to support. So those numbers need to equal out. We want to continue to improve our district's financial condition. That's by funding reserves and maintaining low fiscal stress. And we want to maintain transparency. So we do post all of our budget information, like I said, on our website. We also post under the Board of Education page under financials, our financial statements, which is part of our audit each year by our external auditor, as well as their report and any corrective actions that they recommend to us, and then our response to their corrective actions and how we're going to fix what they've suggested that we look at. So how is our budget funded? Again, I'm pointing out, which I'll do many times throughout our budget process, whatever we spend, we have to generate enough revenue to support. So those numbers will have to equal. And our sources of revenue include state aid, fund balance allocation, appropriations from reserves, pilots, which are payment in lieu of taxes, other local revenues, which include interest on bank accounts, health service costs billed to other districts, E-rate, fees, resident tuition, Medicaid reimbursements, and fees for use of facilities. So those are the kind of other local revenues we include in our calculation. And then, of course, property taxes. So as you may have seen in Newsday within the last few weeks, we did get our first run of state aid. I didn't note here, you see the little star next to our universal pre-kindergarten funding. That money can only be used for the purpose of funding our pre-K program. So that cannot be used to offset our general fund tax levy. And I like to point that out because the state just gives us the total in the bottom, which is what's published in Newsday. So when you're looking at that, you think, wow, that's part of what we could use to offset our budget, but it is not. So I do like to point that out. This is the first draft of the budget, revenue budget from the state. The state will give us another run, probably late March, early April. And I do also want to point out, if you look in the 24-25 actual column, our high cost, excess cost aid is somewhat lower than it normally would be. And when I called to find out why that is, they had indicated some of our stacks had not been finalized yet. So we are working on that process with our consultant. We expect that that number will go back up to around the same number you see in the projected field when we get the next state aid run in late March, early May. Late March, early April. I'm really forcing the year away here. Okay. So again, this is just a projection. We'll get another projection in a few months. And then really the final numbers for this year will come out around this time next year. So fund balance and reserves as a revenue source. We use these, and I'll talk a little bit more about each of them, as a way to balance our budget. So when we're looking at the revenues, these are ways to help create revenue to support the entire budget. So we have the amount that our expenditure budget is totaling. Fund balance is comprised of revenues received that are in excess or more than we budgeted, that we thought we were going to get, and expenditures that come in less than what we thought. So that's how you get fund balance at the end of any school year. Fund balance is good for many reasons, as you can see. And what's good about fund balance, it could be used for a couple of different things. You know, you can use part of it to fund your future budget if you wanted to do that, or at the end of the school year, if you have fund balance, you could use it to fund your reserve accounts. So you can see here in the last couple of years, we have used the fund balance allocation from the current year to fund our budget for the next year as a revenue source. We have reduced our reliance on that, which is a good thing. It shouldn't be something we rely on heavily, but it's there if we need it. So if we need to balance our budget, we could do that. A reserve fund is a savings account, and the state sets particular rules on how you can set them up, how you can fund them, and how you can take monies out of them. So you'll hear things like capital reserve or the retirement reserve. There are a number of different types of reserves that you can have as a school district. In the last several years, we've used our ERS, our TRS, and our unemployment reserves to help offset costs in our revenue side of the budget to balance our budget. And there you can see the summary. We have increased our reliance on using reserves, which is not a bad thing because the controller likes to see us using our reserves. They don't want us to just be putting money away and just having it sit there. They want to see money going in, money being used as it's needed, and then if we can replenish it, we do. So the controller's office does like to see that activity. So everybody's favorite, the tax levy limit calculation, which many know as the 2% tax cap. You'll hear that talked about in Newsday. So what is the tax cap? It was brought into play in June of 2011, and what it really does is limit the annual growth of our tax levy. It gives us a formula, which we'll review in a few slides, that we have to put in a number of different numbers and information that we get from various sources. And at the end, it gives us what we are allowed to levy while being compliant with the tax cap. So some key important components of the tax cap are our tax base growth factor, and that comes from the Office of Real Property Tax. We did see an increase this year in that number, so we're happy to see that because what that means is that there's growth in the community. What exactly in the community has grown, I'm not sure. They don't tell us that, but it's really based on construction and capital improvements, quality changes of real property within the district. So the state sets that number and then they assign it to the school districts. The allowable levy growth factor is the CPI. So as we ended December of last year, the CPI was really 2.9, but for our purposes within this calculation, we are only allowed to use 2% as a maximum number there. So you'll see that's the same as last year. And pilots, which I mentioned earlier, payments in lieu of taxes. These are agreements that businesses make with the IDA. It gives them a set payment, which is usually less than what they would pay if their property was on the tax rolls over a fixed period of time. So they get a bit of a discount on their taxes, and it's really to bring business into the community and help the community grow. The capital exclusion. So when they set the tax levy limit calculation up, the state did not want to harm districts or discourage us from continuing to maintain our buildings and do things like buy new buses or trucks or et cetera. So they do allow us to exempt some of those expenditures from the tax levy limit calculation. So when you see the exclusion is something that may make our allowable levy go up. because we're taking costs off the table as far as consideration. And that's again, because the state wants us to maintain and improve our buildings and not have things falling apart. And retirement contributions, if our ERS or TRS rates were to go above 2% increase in any calendar fiscal year, the state would let us exclude that amount. Fortunately, this year we do not have that. And again, we are required to file our tax cap by March 1st. So just for fun, that's the tax levy limit calculation. And to make it a little easier on everybody, I put it into a little bit easier of a format here. Just so you start off with last year's levy, and you really go through and grab all of those items we just discussed in the prior slides. And you'll notice here, the highlighted in yellow on the bottom is our capital tax levy, our capital exclusion, if you will. That's under review, and why is that? Because we're still waiting for some information. Part of that calculation is information we get from NASA BOCES, and they did tell us that they are having their meeting on February 6th, so that they will be sending us that information shortly thereafter. So I had last year's figures in here just as a placeholder. I don't anticipate they'll change a lot, but we'll know after BOCES has their meeting on February 6th.
Do you think we'll have it by our board meeting that following week? Will the turnaround be that quick?
I hope so. Yeah, but if it's not available at the board meeting, I will certainly present this again in March, just so the final numbers are out there for everyone to see.
And when we do get them internally, I would share.
Yeah. And then the other thing we're looking at, Mr. Carter and I are finalizing potential capital projects that we might do next year. So that number is, really just a placeholder. I have last year's number in there as well for the capital projects. So when all is said and done, right now we sit with an allowable levy of 2.81%, and that would keep us in compliance with the tax cap. And again, that's higher than 2% because we have those exclusions that allow us a little bit more ability to levy, because the state wants us to keep our things in check and our buildings in good repair. So these here are some things that are challenges as part of our budget process. Every year our insurance goes up. Happily this year, and you'll see in the next slide, some of our insurance can go up as much, our health insurance, but our liability insurance likely will go up, and we have not gotten that yet. We'll probably get that in March or April. Changes in enrollment for students and staff, those things kind of come hand in hand. Additional services, I know there's a lot of CSE meetings going on now. We have new students coming to district that need different types of services, ENL, special ed, et cetera. Those things come into play that we might not know today, but are something we have to think about as far as budget. Transportation, our non-public transportation applications are due on April 1st, which is right before the board's scheduled to adopt the budget. So we have to kind of guesstimate what we think will happen as far as transportation with that. CPI for transportation, bus routes won't come out until June. So again, we have to look back and see what's happened in the past, kind of try to guesstimate what kind of increases might come that will affect our contract rates. BOCES services for the 25-26 school year, they start to trickle in with the rates, usually between March and April. So again, we're working with just estimates of what we think might increase. And again, our state aid allocation, we will get another run of it in late March, early April, but we'll see what that looks like. So these are all things that we're thinking about as we're preparing the budget. And just because I'd like people to realize, one of the hugest costs in our budget is, relating to staff is health insurance. So these are the premiums for the 25 calendar year. And so, of course, our employees in their contractual agreements are required to pay a piece of this depending on the arrangement that they've set up. But this is what the premium is for 2025. And our fiscal year 25-26, we don't know what the 2026 rates will be. So we look back at projections from prior years and what actually came to fruition. We talk amongst our colleagues. My colleagues meet, in fact, we're meeting this Friday to kind of talk about these things. How are people thinking about budgeting for that year that's kind of in question? We don't know what's going to come out. We hope it's going to be a small increase like this year, but we could get walloped. Right. So it's kind of a guessing game.
But you guys talk projections for
Yep.
everyone's not.
Yeah, and I try to stay with the pack. I don't want to be the outlier either way. So what the majority of the group is doing, I feel, is a comfortable thing to be. So I think all of us in school administration, we all rely on our colleagues and discussions to really kind of get an idea and to move forward.
And even yesterday at my superintendent component meeting, we were talking about the max of the tax levy, and we were all about 2.8, 2.83. So it appears, I think Merrick was a little lower, maybe like 2.4, but they didn't get the aid. Their first aid run was very low compared to what the rest of the components did receive and what was anticipated, which has an effect on that formula.
Right.
So we usually do all remain in the same.
Neck and neck.
What were we last year? What was our tax levy? Was it two?
I think it was
I wanna say
2.67.
2.67, and then budget to budget was high because we added a special education class,
Right.
a 611 here. And I think we were upwards of 5.89,
I think it was 5.9.
there you go, I was
Yeah.
close,
Yeah.
5.9. So we don't have budget to budget yet because we still have a couple of unknowns, as you can see. The irony is we send this out for the public in May to vote on, but we're getting numbers up until May.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is looking at trends and anticipating the cost, but not under anticipating the cost because you don't want to be in that situation.
Any questions?
This is great, thank you.
You're
I
very
think once we get the numbers.
Yep.
At the
Numbers are
next
coming.
budget,
Yes.
numbers are coming, well, we hope they're coming.
Yeah.
Right, and then, but in terms of building the reserves, any ideas for where we can, help to build our reserve funds?
I think, well, this will be my first year on with us and really the first year I've gone through the cycle with the district. So I'm constantly looking at those things, seeing where we can, kind of maybe save some money. If we can get, like we've gotten grants in the past to pay for things. If we budget for something and then we get a grant to pay for it, we have some extra money on the table that we could put towards reserves. So I'm looking into that. A question came up at the other meeting about other types of reserves, are there reserves that are available that we should be taking advantage of? And it really is something I'm going to keep an eye on. Being new here, I'm looking at everything for the first time and really kind of trying to get the lay of the land and see what's best for us. So certainly something I'm going to be looking into because that really, the reserves is something that strengthens our financial position, which keeps us off the naughty list.
Yeah.
As we know, we've been there.
Yeah, we don't want to be there.
And I think a lot of it also is proper budgeting and getting as close as you can without under. Because when you under budget, then you're putting less and less back into reserves, but you don't want to excessively over budget either because we're not piercing the cap.
Yeah.
And we're not doing that to taxpayers. So it is that balance that you
Yes.
talked about. Whatever your expenses are, you need to have the minimum amount in revenue, if not a little more. And see, but it's nice when we do budget for something and then we get that $100,000 grant.
Right into the reserve, that's great.
And also looking at things from a 3 to 5 year plan. We did 3 playgrounds in 3 years, not 3 playgrounds in 1 year.
Right.
And we're looking at that with Mr. Carter now and Mrs. Donnelly about a 5-year, keeping our buildings safe, keeping them secure, keeping them at a point where our windows are good, our flooring is good, and doing it all in a manageable sense. So, great.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to come. I couldn't make that night meeting,
Yeah,
so this
okay.
was great. This was great to have
Yeah.
be another option
Yes,
for me.
absolutely.
I knew it was out there, so it's easier for me to say, okay, I can't make that one though.
All right. And then we have on Tuesday, we have 5:30 exact, 6:15 budget, 7 o'clock